Please, Caitlin.
Mr. President, this morning you said that you do not want to fund the U.S. Postal Service because Democrats are trying to expand voting by mail. So I've got two questions for you. One, are you threatening to veto any legislation that includes funding for the post office?
No, not at all, no.
So you would sign something that does include funding?
A separate thing, I would do it. But one of the reasons the post office needs that much money is to have all of these millions of ballots coming in from nowhere, and nobody knows from where and where they're going. You saw what happened in Caitlin in Virginia. It was 500,000 applications coming in, going all over the state. Nobody even knows where they came from. You saw what happened in New York, which was a disaster with Congresswoman Carolyn Maloney. It was a basic disaster. And you see Paterson, New Jersey, what's going on there. And we can give you many other locations and sites. What has happened is that's part of a big negotiation. That's actually small part of a big negotiation to get more money to people that it wasn't their fault. It was China's fault. And post office is part of it. Another part of it is they want $3.5 billion just for the ballots themselves. Why it's so much, I don't know, but that's what the Democrats want. But if the bill isn't going to get done, that would mean the post office isn't going to get funded, and that would also mean that the $3.5 billion isn't going to be taken care of. So I don't know how you could possibly use these ballots, these mail-in ballots. Absentee ballots, by the way, are fine. But the universal mail-ins that are just sent all over the place, where people can grab them and grab stacks of them and sign them and do whatever you want, that's the thing we're against.
But isn't that precisely the problem, is that you're saying you do not want to give this post office funding in this coronavirus legislation? They say they need it so they can be prepared. So if the pandemic is still going on in November when the election happens and people don't feel safe to go vote in person, they can vote by mail, and it can be safe and it can be secure.
I can understand the post office, and if we could agree to a bill, the overall bill, which is obviously a much bigger number than just the post office, that would be fine. But they have the post office as one of their requests. It's their request.
Right, but this morning you said you were against it, didn't you?
I'm only against, what I'm against is I'm against doing anything where the people aren't taken care of, and the people aren't being taken care of properly. We want people to get money. It wasn't their fault that they got shut down. They got shut down by China. So whether it's the post office or whether it's the $3.5 billion, they're asking for $3.5 billion just for the universal mail-in ballots, but they're not willing to make a deal. These are 2 points within a very big deal. The thing they want more than anything else, Caitlin, and you know this, is bailout money for the states and for the cities that are in trouble, which, for the most part, are Democrat-run states and cities. So New York has a problem, California has a problem, Illinois has a tremendous problem, and others. They want to be able to bail out these states, and we don't want to be doing that, or certainly don't want to do it to the extent they're looking for $1 trillion. We don't want to be doing that. Please, go ahead.
I'm just really confused, because this morning you said they need that money in order to make the post office work so it can take all these millions and millions of ballots, and you said that would be fraudulent. So it sounded like you said you're blocking.
No, I said it will end up being fraudulent, because if you look at what's happened over the last few weeks, just look at the few instances where this has happened, it's turned out to be fraudulent. Well, if you look at New York, it was fraudulent. If you look at Paterson, New Jersey, it was fraudulent. Of course there is. The whole thing is a mess. In fact, Carolyn Maloney's opponent he's gone crazed. He said they took the election away from him, and he may be right. I think they should redo that election. And if you look at Virginia, it's terrible. Look at some of the things that have happened in California. Look at California, where they found 1 million non-eligible voters. That was done by Judicial Watch, Tom Fitton and Judicial Watch. We have to have an honest election. And if it's not going to be an honest election, I guess people have to sit down and think really long and hard about it. But if the post office, if they're not going to approve a bill, and the post office therefore won't have the money, and if they're not going to approve a big bill, a bigger bill, and they're not going to have the $3.5 billion for the universal mail-in votes, how can you have those votes? What would mean is the people will have to go to the polls and vote, like the old days, like 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 4 years ago. They have to go to the. It doesn't say anybody's taking the vote away, but it means that the universal mail-ins don't work. Absentees do work. It's a very different thing. An absentee, where you make an application and you send it in, they send you a vote, it's different. But so, Caitlin, I'm not saying anything wrong with voting. I want them to vote. But that would mean that they'd have to go to a voting booth like they used to and vote.
Even if they don't feel safe voting in person, people want to vote by mail because.
Well, they're going to have to feel safe, and they will be safe, and we will make sure that they're safe. And we're not going to have to spend $3.5 billion to do it. And when you go to a voting, it would be wonderful if we had voting ID, and some states have that, and some states don't because they can't get it passed. Most states want it. But we want people to vote. But we want people to vote, so when they vote, it means one vote. It doesn't mean ballots all over the place. You saw what was happening in Virginia, where piles of ballot applications are dropped all over the state. They had them named after dogs. They had them named after dead people. We want to have an accurate vote. I'm not doing this for any reason. Maybe the other turns out to be my advantage. I don't know. I can't tell you that. But I do know this. I just want an accurate vote. And it's a fair question, by the way. So does everybody else.